In lieu of an ad this week, we just want to talk to you quickly about how you can support a local business during this tough time. With the COVID-19 outbreak, a lot of local small businesses have chosen to close their doors. Here are some ways you can help them during this time. You can buy a gift card. You can shop online or over the phone. You can leave a review. You can promote them on social media, or you can subscribe to any newsletter or email lists they might have. They're going to need you now more than ever.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have Stephanie Boutari. Stephanie makes me very happy every day, and I don't even think she knows she's doing it.
Yeah, her murals around Waterloo Region are so bright and bold and vibrant and probably the most eye-catching public art pieces in town.
Yeah, I agree. And I have to say, kudos to the local businesses that are hiring her to beautify their buildings and their parking lots and their retaining walls, because we're really enjoying it.
Yeah, her journey is a really interesting story. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it.
Let's go.
Yep,
okay, so we're here with Stephanie Boutari. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I would describe you as a mural artist.
Yes.
Yeah?
Primarily.
Primarily.
I'd like to branch out beyond specifically murals and different kinds of art, but that's mainly what I'm doing these days.
Which we're really excited to talk about, we usually start this out by talking about how we met. Because we've known a lot of our guests so far, but we just cold DM'd you through Instagram, and you were nice enough to not think we were serial killers and come to my house here out in the suburbs.
Yeah,
so
that was
awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I just want to talk a little bit about your history. So some of the stuff that Marshall and I saw online was you have a background in architecture.
Yeah.
I saw that you do some realistic painting.
That's how I started off.
Okay.
Yeah. Not that I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not doing a lot of that these days, but that was, in high school when I first started painting, that was what I was interested in. Yes, I guess a lot of my older work is more realism. Yeah.
And you've lived in Waterloo Region for some time?
I went to the University of Waterloo in 2006. But then I kind of worked in Toronto after that, and then came back to the area in 2017. So it's kind of back and forth, I guess. I was in Cambridge, though. In the University of Waterloo, the architecture school was in Cambridge. I was actually living there for 5 years. Although in between co-ops, I would go to Toronto for co-op terms, like to do internships. And then I went to Vancouver one time. But yeah. So
my main question that I want to ask is, how come you're not an architect? How did you get to be this beautiful mural artist, and what was that process like for you?
Well, it was a lot of denial, I think. Well, the thing is, it took me a long time to just accept that I wasn't going to be an architect. Like, I just kept thinking, like, I'll be an architect, like, eventually, And the thing is, even though I did my master's, which is you have to do that if you want to get your license. And then after that, you have to do a certain number of hours under licensed architect, and then a bunch of exams. So it's a long process to actually get your license. Although you can work, like, you don't have to get your license. You can work for a firm forever. But anyways, so I had in the back of my mind there was something I wanted to do, but I kept procrastinating. Like, I was working, but not actually, like, doing the whole logging my hours thing. And, like, I worked for total, like, internships was 3 years, and then 2 years after that, like, at least 5 years.
And you worked at a firm in town?
Different firms,
okay.
Yeah. In Toronto, mostly. And I didn't log any of those hours because I was like, I'll just do it sometime. Because I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that I wasn't going to do it, but right. I just didn't want to accept it. The whole mural thing was basically something that I discovered while in architecture school. For our thesis, we're given a lot of freedom. It could be literally any topic as long as you tie it back to architecture. And at that time, I had already graduated from the bachelor program, which is 5 years long. I really missed painting, which was, I wanted to do art from the very beginning, but it just kind of like I was going to go to art school, but then I kind of chickened out and just thought like it's too risky. And then I got interested in architecture and I thought, you know what, this is creative too. And then I kind of just got sucked into the world of architecture. And I did enjoy a lot of aspects of it, but not all aspects of the work. And then I also felt that I wasn't as good as some of my peers, especially at like the more technical things, the more, I don't know, like getting into like structures and building technology. Like that was never my strong suit. I was more interested in like sort of artistic side of things. Yeah. But anyways, I feel like I'm rambling.
That's the whole point here. Ramble away. Yeah.
So let me backtrack. So yeah, master's. So we get to do a thesis that's pretty, broad, whatever topic we want. And I was like, you know what? I want to explore color in architecture. I want to get back into painting and, explore that. And then I started, researching public art and murals and urban art. And I felt like, this isn't something we ever talk about in architecture school, especially color. Like everything was all about these pristine white models or, wooden models. And it was all about form and space. And it was never really like about color. And things like art on the walls or whatever, or paint, was just kind of seen as like a superficial afterthought, or just something that other people would do after the architect designs a space. So it was kind of like a bit of like an antithesis or whatever to architecture school. But, and then, not a lot of the profs were supportive except one who's awesome. He was my advisor. He was really interested and he actually felt like that I had something like interesting to talk about. And then it was also very contemporary, he felt, because of like the way, architecture was changing, like newer buildings, like how they kind of have been focusing more and more on these crazy different skins. And I don't know, there was just a lot of stuff there to look at and to research. And I was
almost hitting it at a good time.
Yeah. And there was just so much more to the topic than just mural painting, but the sort of mural painting was my way of investigating it while supporting it with all this other research, and kind of talking about all these different things within the field of architecture. But that was basically how I started mural painting. So there was a building across the School of Architecture, which I thought would be a perfect canvas for painting, but I had never done anything like that. I had just done traditional types of paintings, like on canvas. So, I mean, I didn't even know who owned the building, so I just Googled it and found an email and found a phone number and then called, the property owner or whatever. And then he was so nice and open to the idea of, even though I didn't have anything to show him, he had an issue with people tagging the building. So he thought, that might deter that. And and then I kind of showed him some ideas of what I would do. And then he was like, sure. Like he was very easygoing, which was so surprising. Like I've never had a client as easygoing as that since. So it was kind of like gave me false hope. But anyways,
false hope.
So after that, it was very, very difficult for me to actually physically execute the mural because I had no experience doing it and I'd never even used spray paint before.
Right.
But I was inspired by a lot of artists. And I'd been doing research and I just really wanted to get into it. And part of the way it tied into my thesis for architecture was I was basically trying to argue like this is just a layer of paint, but I'm technically transforming this architecture. It's still architecture in a way, like even though it's just a thin layer on the building, at what point is it just art or a painting, and at what point does it become architecture? Like if it changes how you perceive the whole building. So that was kind of like what I was exploring in my
love that
thesis.
idea.
Yeah, and like a lot of artists / architects / people that are doing a bit of both, like sculptural works, or there's even these architects that do more kind of these big art installations, they're kind of all really in between the two in that way. Like, just the kind of effects of color or lighting, and they do these installations where all these kind of like the boundary between what is technically like architecture in terms of being purely functional space or being a kind of immersive experience, like that's more like art, but then it kind of blur the two. And then especially I find that in a lot of like art galleries, they're kind of creating those ideas, like Yayoi Kusama, for example, with all those dots and stuff. Like it's art, but it's also architecture, I think. So
totally.
Yeah, so those kind of subjects I was really fascinated with. But anyways, after doing that, and I did a few murals while in grad school, I still went back to architecture after graduating. I'm like, well, I'm done. Time to get a job. Like, and then I was working for a firm but it was a pretty cool, like creatively speaking, because it wasn't like a typical architecture firm. They create a lot of art too. So they had a fabrication shop and they did metal woodworking, sculptures and things like that. So I did enjoy it. And then on the weekends, I started doing murals like on the side. Like I didn't plan on doing it, but what happened was because of the ones I did during grad school, it led to some inquiries. One from the same building owner who had another building, and then a couple more after that because of the actual interior designs I was doing, like Abe Erb and Settlement. I was involved in the interior design of those spaces. So then when the client wanted a mural, I was like, hey,
guess what?
I actually do murals. My boss didn't really want me to do that. Like, even though it was going to be separate, like in my free time, he was like, no, like she doesn't do that. She's an architect, like, but the client was kind of like, he knew that it would be definitely cheaper to hire me when it's just a side gig than someone who's professional who'd be doing it like a long time.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And for me, it was just like a bonus thing. It wasn't like, this is how I make my living. So I think I gave him a really good price for it. But anyways, so that was what it was. So I think during the couple years I was working there in Toronto, I had done like 3 or 4 murals kind of on weekends. And then it got to this point where I was kind of at a crossroads where I started to feel like I needed to just pursue art like full time, because it was slowly making me a bit depressed seeing other artists. Like I was looking at other artists and researching and following them on Instagram, the more I was like jealous.
I get this feeling sometimes too, where I feel out of the creative loop. So it's like you don't want to be jealous and you don't want to have those down and out feelings, but it almost presents as jealousy. And then if you start to dig a little deeper, it's like, oh, it's because I'm not involved.
Yeah.
It's because I know that feeling and I'm not getting it from what I'm doing every day. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't even about like achieving their level of success. It was more like, I just want to try. Like if it doesn't work, that's okay. I just want to know that I tried. Like, after going to university and never even trying to do the art thing because I was too chicken. And then I was at this point where like, clearly I'm not going to get my license. I don't want to anymore. Like it was funny because I'd been so afraid to just let go of architecture because like, oh, I spent 7 years in architecture school. And I also went to U of T first. So that was 1 year. So I was like in school for 8 years. And then to throw that all away, like my parents were not, like so keen on that idea. And weirdly enough, after quitting my job, I actually felt a huge relief. Like it was not as scary as I thought it would be. I actually felt like a burden had been lifted. Like it was weird.
I don't think it's so weird. I think you were finally in that place. I mean, if I may speak for you, you're finally in that place where you're admitting what it is you actually want to do, what it is that you're actually good at, what it is that's actually going to make you happy, and all those pieces of the puzzle are coming together. It's a beautiful thing. Marshall and I were talking before you got here about mural painting and all of the beautification that's happening in the cities, and how exciting that is for us, because Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge has been very brown, very gray, very brown, very gray for a long time. And we've all been so hungry for it, not knowing it, that when this stuff pops up, it's very exciting for us as just like a traveler in our city to see this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it helps us have a deeper connection with our city the more public art there is that we connect with.
Definitely, yeah.
I think what makes your work so powerful, Stephanie, is it's just so beautiful in its simplicity.
Thank you.
It's not simplistic. It's just beautiful and profound in how simple it is with color and line. And a lot of that, whether you can really pinpoint it or not, must have been influenced by the kind of what I would call the nuts and bolts of your architecture program and what you were taught, right?
So,
and it's there within you regardless. So I'd like you to talk a bit about what kind of influences the maybe the compositions and the color of your mural. But I want to say quickly that I always think that whatever it is that's got us here, kind of in hindsight, you can see where it set us up, you know what I mean? Like as I reflect back, I go, oh, this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't done this, or if I hadn't been in that class or met that person.
Exactly.
Sometimes I want to say, I wish I hadn't done any of it and just saved my money and not gone to school.
But then that's part of who you are. You carry that
for
with
sure.
you.
So it's actually really almost disrespectful to your past and all that work you put in.
Totally.
If you in any way devalue it.
Yeah.
Anyways, can you talk about your work compositionally and specifically about color and maybe how the two work together?
Well, I think there's like two parts of me usually. Like there's the part where it's just instinctual and I'm not necessarily like have, you know, a logical reason behind certain choices. They just kind of like, you know, just come to me like in the flow of working.
So it's not one of those things where you're sitting down like, okay, today I'm going to work with triangles and I'm going to make sure they're 3D and this is, it's more of a process.
It's a bit of both.
Is it? Yeah.
So I feel like it's like this inner dialogue and like basically depending on the site and the context, certain things will just kind of like come to mind, you know, or sort of feel like this could use that like, or this wall, like, or, you know, there's colors around the building that like either work with it or don't. So the one across from the School of Architecture, one where I, you know, stalked the owner. So that one was I don't know if you have an image of it, but it's basically like a series of windows. I mean, they're not really windows, but that was how I sort of interpreted my design, where it was this big gray blank wall, and I wanted to basically create an architecture on it that didn't exist using paint. So I divided it up into these boxes, and then using, you know, contrasting shades and colors, wanted to create the illusion that they're going into the wall. And then I added these fluid forms to kind of soften it a bit because I felt that I know
exactly which one you mean now.
Yeah, because I felt like it was too harsh, too rigid, just being like the rectilinear boxes. And then my choice of colors was actually just based on the surroundings. It was just the red brick of the building and then the sky. I know it sounds cheesy, but I'm like, there's not much color happening here. And I didn't want to use green because I felt like I didn't want to compete with nature.
That's a great perspective.
But just in that context, like it's not like I don't use green, but
for this specific piece, it was something you didn't want to get into. Yeah. Yeah,
and also I think because I was still in school and I was trying to limit my color palette, I was like more regimented. That's the architect in me, I guess. But then I did kind of deviate. Like, so I had this basically, I have a tendency with all my work to have a sort of set of rules that I like follow or like create, but then I always break them. Like, so the whole thing has to generally follow like a system, but I like to break it like in one or two spots to kind of like catch your eye or give it like a bit of, I don't know, nuance. Like,
oh, for sure.
So in that case, like the main color were red and blue and they kind of like fade into each other with pinks. But then there's like one spot with the yellow. Like, I don't know. It's just like just this weird. Yeah.
Just to break those
I don't know.
rules.
I like do that a lot. But yeah, like I guess in terms of composition, I tend to approach it according to the context. And colors also driven a bit by both by context and sort of sometimes the client, or like I know that, you know, because now I do this more commercially, sometimes I know they want something super colorful or they want to include one of their brand colors and stuff. So I always, I mean, it's more of a challenge to kind of follow everything I want to do fully when you're doing it commercially. Like, I mean, I'm the one creating the designs for everything, but it's just different in the sense that I have a brief. Like,
right.
So it's kind of like something I'm trying to balance. Yeah. There was one time while in school, I was helping a restaurant out with like redesigning their signage, and because it was on a heritage building in Cambridge, they rejected it, even though I literally picked like heritage colors, because they wanted it to be exactly, even though the sign part was already new, like that existed. Like, I mean, it was like
it had been painted previously.
Yeah.
Kind of?
Okay.
And they wanted, could you still see that previous?
It was like some, I can't even remember, but they had added some piece of wood or something, and it wasn't even like good. Anyways, but yeah, I feel like,
so that would have been one instance where it didn't get through that approval process.
Like, right? Cities can be really strict about, color. Actually, I find that these areas, they tend to be more strict about public art, probably, and like, I don't know, just compared to Toronto. Like Toronto, every corner you see art.
You do.
My studio is like in New Hamburg, and apparently, I don't know this for sure, but this is just what I was told, that they don't allow murals, like even if it's your own building, unless it's like commissioned or whatever by the city, and it's like about like the history or whatever. You can't, just because we have a shop and it's so, the walls are so ugly, we just want to paint it because it keeps getting tagged by like horrible, not beautiful graffiti.
Scribbly.
Yeah. I always find when it's that relentless, it's never well done.
Yeah.
No. If you're going to do it, make an effort, people.
Yeah. On the mailboxes.
Yeah.
They did it on everything. They did it on the walls, the door, the trucks, So we're like, we should do something, but it's not allowed. So.
And every different city and municipality and township, they all have different rules about this kind of stuff.
Definitely.
So that could be another reason why also. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't done my due diligence though. I haven't done like full research on the thing. Like, so
I'm pretty sure if you weren't allowed, you'd know about it.
Like you're an outsider mural artist. When I think about public art, I think about, so you put a piece of public art up, a mural, you paint it at a certain, time in your life at a certain time of day, and then it has a life that goes on beyond that as you go home.
Yeah.
When you come back and you see your work, in not just in photographs, but let's say in person, depending on what time of day it is, or the passage of time may have changed it, and then possibly even the crowd of people who are around it or not around it, it could just be lonely and by itself. What are the kind of things you see in your work? If you haven't seen it for a few months, let's say, you come upon it, what do you see? Do you know what you see right away in it and how you feel about it?
Well, it's been different for different projects, but like 100% of the time when I know I'm going to see one of my murals, I have anxiety. And almost always I'm a little negative about it when I see it.
That's just an artist.
Yeah, I think that's
enough of them. Yeah.
I'm just critical, and like generally I'm just super critical of it. It's not that I hate it or whatever. I just think of how I would do it differently now, or I just question certain decisions I made. But I'm always aware of the fact that I'm being negative and critical, and I sort of step back and just say, well, you know what? It doesn't have to last forever or be relevant forever. And it still has a role to play, and I'm glad I had the opportunity, and I'm still grateful for it. I just have to like calm down. And certain things are just lessons too, like, with the like Goudies Lane, for example.
That's where we first saw your work. We took a promo photo in front of your mural there. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. I know it's wearing really badly because I didn't.
It almost looks cooler. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's got a life cycle, like you were talking about. Maybe it's not going to be permanent, but it looks great.
And it has a relationship to the other public art that's in there. And
that's true.
And that's where we found you, and then we decided to cold call you and see if you'd come join.
I'm literally I'm dreading looking at it because I know it's like wearing. But yeah, I should just embrace that. But like other things, like I've never had anything tagged before. Touch wood.
Yeah, touch wood, exactly.
Because I think most people that do that just target blank walls or advertising. Like it's occasional that they'll do that on another piece of art. So, but
It'd be neat
Can't
to do.
remember what I was going to say.
Oh no, I think you answered it. You were talking about revisiting your art, going back to it. I think it would be neat to take one of your pieces and maybe like visit it once a week, or once a day would be a little cumbersome, but like once a week for a couple of years and take a photo and sort of put those together to see how it does degrade or improve or change in the light. That'd be a neat project to do.
And sometimes it's a positive surprise too. Like occasionally it's been like, hey, this looks so cool. Like, because sometimes I'm so into it, working on it and like exhausted and trying to get it done. Yeah. And then I go back like after a week, I'm like, wow, I did that. Like when, you know, like, so it's not always negative, but yeah.
That's great. I wanted to ask a little bit, sorry, Marshall, I just wanted to ask a little bit about the, your medium. So obviously when you were doing realistic painting, you're probably in acrylics and oils, maybe watercolor, I'm not sure. There's a photo that we saw of you online, working on, I'm not sure what piece it is, but you're indoors, maybe in your studio, working on a piece. It's not out on a wall yet, or maybe it's just a standalone piece. And you're in your painting clothes, you've got your face mask on for the fumes, you've got your spray cans everywhere. And so it's such a powerful image because the art is gorgeous. It's this, the words that come to mind, and I'm not a pro, but the words that come to mind when I think about your art are like cubist, three-dimensional, graphic,
love that,
modern,
all of
like,
it.
And then there's this beautiful piece of art, and there you are looking like a badass with your spray cans.
I want to know what this picture is. I don't remember.
I don't know. It might be on your Facebook or something like that. So I think spray paint would be such an incredibly hard medium to use. I mean, I've tried to spray paint little things around my house, you know, fix up a number for the front of the house or whatever, and I find it so hard to use. Like, how did you get into it? How did you get that flow of making it look so great?
Oh, thank you. Well, compared to, say, you know, graffiti artists that do like the lettering and everything, I don't think I'm as proficient as they are, but it was definitely a learning curve. You know, the first time using it, I'm like, what the hell? Because I felt like I had so much more control with a brush, you know, and it just comes out so fast. And I found that very intimidating. And it's also the drips and like trying to figure out like how far to hold it and what kind of nozzle. So it was a lot of learning. But I
was gonna say, even the smells and sounds, like the rattling of that ball and everything about it
makes me want to do it.
Abrasive.
It's really fun. Like I don't really know. Other than just trying, that's the only way.
Experimenting.
Actually, to be honest, the one I did this summer with a fish on it, so that was the first time I had used spray paint to do something like figurative like that. Like I'd always use it for geometric,
where you did like a taping
gradients.
process, and you would do layering kind of. That's, I'm assuming with that.
Oh, well, more like just taping sections of color and is using the sprays to create gradients. Okay. So I was comfortable shading, so that was something I could do comfortably, but trying to do crisp lines and like shapes and like the fish and all that. So I started at the top because I'm like, at least if I don't do this very well, no one will see it. But so I was very slow, and it took me a lot longer to do the mural than I anticipated. But, you know, a friend of mine who's a graffiti artist, he's like, you're using the wrong nozzle. Try these ones. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I got the hang of it, and I was like, this isn't as scary as I thought it was.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and then I went back up and fixed what I didn't like, But yeah, for a while it was looking bad, and actually someone came up there to take my photo. I'm like, no, they're gonna see that. I'm gonna look so unprofessional. But anyways,
do you put down like a white primer first, or do you go directly onto like brick or wood or whatever it is your surface is?
I usually will, if it hasn't been painted already, I will put a primer if it's on concrete or brick.
Yeah, like is it a spray paint? I don't know. Is it a spray paint primer?
Oh, well.
Or like a gesso, like an acrylic gesso.
I didn't put the primer myself. I'll ask them to prime it.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would, actually I have primed it before. Never mind. I just remember. But it was just a concrete masonry primer that I would roll on.
It, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like a white canvas. You're working on a white canvas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just mainly to help seal the concrete.
And give something for that
spray
to
it's not just absorb, you know.
Yeah, because the spray will just get. I didn't see the first one. I didn't do that, but I learned because it was a lot more paint to use But yeah, so like in my more recent one, I was just saying like I didn't do it because just the one I most recently did, they painted it, but the one before that I had primed it. So
yeah.
But
when you work that scale, is it a lot of you're up close to it, you're laying these colors down, and then you stand up and you back up, or you get off a ladder or whatever you're doing, and you're constantly going back and forth distance wise between the mural, basically inches away, and then you're like need to be 10 feet away.
Definitely. Yeah.
What are your tools there? Like, are you working in Photoshop and you're designing small, or are you just getting up there, or are you using a sketchbook? Like, are you creating a grid pattern? It seems so cumbersome to me. Like, I'm just like, what is the magic of making this work, you know?
Well, it always starts with sketching. Like, even though I do rely on my tablet to, you know, edit and to put it onto the photo, in the beginning, I have to be just on paper, because I can't, you know, zoom in or like undo. Actually, I was on my iPad for so long, you know, it's like double tap to undo. I got so used to that, I was sketching and I literally double tapped the paper. I was like,
this is how evolution will change us.
This is not good. Yeah, so like, you know, I've been doing it too long when that happens. But so usually I'll just do, you know, sketches, and sometimes, like, depending what I'm inspired to do, I'll do like paint sketches. So I'll just take paint and like whatever. Yeah. But then I translate it digitally into my tablet and then tweak it and then place it on the photo. Or sometimes I start with sketching on the photo on my tablet.
So you're saying you're taking a photo of the wall,
yes,
in its environment.
Yes, sorry.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure everyone kind of understands, and then you're superimposing that image onto that wall to see how it looks.
And sometimes I draw it like directly on the photo to get an idea of like compositionally, roughly what it is, and then so it's like a lot of back and forth between like sort of physical material and then digital. But I find that with clients, they always want to see a mock-up of what it'll be. So that's why it's important for me to have it on the photo. Like, even if I show them like an actual full design, a concept drawing, they might like it, but they can't picture it. Yeah, they're not sold on it until they see it photoshopped on the wall.
And then I bet everyone's like, wow.
Yeah, then the stress is, now I have to make sure it looks like that. Yeah, which it's so much easier to like have a rougher thing. I mean, maybe I could just be rougher in my renderings.
You could do some like under promising and over delivering.
Like just more loose lines, but I don't know, I always just end up making them look too polished, and then
that's part of the process.
Yeah. Well, my paranoia is trying to color match, because sometimes I'm too, you know, when your screen is backlit, everything looks so bright. And then I'm trying to get it as bright as that in real life, and it's just impossible. The colors just don't come that bright.
And I can imagine that they're going to react differently on different surfaces, but also, like, do spray paints come in like the CMYK or RGB or Pantone?
Well,
like
no. Yeah, and then like
they have like, you know, autumn sunset,
cadmium yellow hue, cerulean blue.
There's quite a few shades to choose from, but yeah, like it's. I mean, no one's ever said this isn't exactly, and they do know it's never going to be exactly like it, but I try to do as close as I can. Yeah. And then sometimes there's things on site that, you know, make me change it intentionally. Like, you know what, this pipe thing here or whatever, really there's no point in adding the leaf over here. It's just going to look bad. Or I'll like move something according to something I hadn't noticed in the wall.
Some type of feature, 3D feature in the wall,
Yeah. And then lighting also, like shadows and all that will change how it appears as well. I'm trying to be as realistic as I can in my renderings, though.
That's great.
I think there's something so empowering. I think about the years you would have spent in your architecture education. I think this resonates with anybody, whether you're in a workplace or whatnot, and you feel somewhat displaced, you know? That feeling of looking over a peer and thinking, this person seems to have these natural abilities that I'll never achieve. Can be really destructive.
Yeah. And
it's a lot of time is going by. And but I think it's there's this great book called The Mindful Writer by Dinty Timur. It's about writing mostly, but it's really about art and about how you can kind of pat yourself on the back down the road and say, that's great that I'm where I'm at now, because and have that awareness of where you were before, and something wasn't feeling right. There was a disconnect.
Yeah.
And then, but now with your murals, you must feel some great satisfaction in doing them on your own terms, you know, and it feeling more like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Definitely. Well, it feels more fulfilling. There's aspects of it that I don't like love, but that's like with any job. Like every job is gonna have like because it's become my job, it's naturally like not going to be as carefree as it was when it was just like my side thing. That's just inevitable, I think. Like,
are you talking about the expectations that once you begin a project like that, there's these pressures and expectations that you have to deliver? Yeah. Which probably isn't unlike architecture, right?
Yeah.
Mostly, and the weight of being, sorry to talk over you, the weight of being identifying now as an artist. Like, I am Stephanie Boutari. I am an artist.
Yeah, it's like so serious now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is pressure I put on myself. But yeah, there's also that in just learning like more of the business side of things, like how to, like how to charge appropriately and like estimating materials, and it's just like all the kind of logistical things that go wrong. But you know what, like those are problems that come up, but they're kind of good problems. Like I still like that I have, like they're shitty at the time they happen, but I'm like, that's kind of cool. Like that this is my problem instead of this other problem. It's like there was something I was reading. I can't remember what it was from. I think it was about careers, and it was how like every job has a different type of shit sandwich, but it's like the shit, if you like the shit sandwich or whatever, like then it's like you like your job or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but it was the way it was worded was so true. So basically at the end of the day, it does feel more fulfilling despite all the natural negative aspects of it that happen.
And how long have you been at this full time now?
2 and a bit years.
Oh, wow. I would have thought you would. It's so beautiful. I would have thought you would have been at it for longer.
Oh, thanks. It was June. I remember it was June 2017.
Wow, that's great.
Gave my
notice.
Actually, no. I gave them 6 weeks notice. I gave them such long notice because I felt so guilty. That
must have been hard to get through those 6 weeks.
Yeah, it was very awkward. Yeah.
I think as artists, we are can be observers of ourselves. Yeah. I find it really odd how over the years, no matter how much experience you have, we don't necessarily toughen up to certain things. Like it's kind of like I'll have this conversation with myself. Let's say for writing, I'll have writer's block, and I'll say to myself, well, I've been here before. I know how this works out. You have writer's block for a while, and then you put one word down and another word, and then a sentence, and then a paragraph, and it gets flowing, and then you can see where it's going to come together.
Yeah.
And it always does, and you always meet your deadline. But when you're in it, you're kind of wallowing in it. And I think
so
as a visual artist yourself, you must at times, through the journey of even just one mural, maybe you're struggling with it or you're questioning it or wondering, and you can't see that place where you can see it's going to be this kind of triumphant moment that you can picture it being done and how it's going to be done.
Yeah.
And yet you'll do it because you've been there before, right?
Well, part of that is not in my control. Like, I know that eventually I'll arrive at a design I'll like, even though sometimes I'm having the creative block. But sometimes I don't know, like, I'm leaving it in the hands of the client to decide. Like, I don't know if they'll approve it, or I don't know what their final decision will be on the budget or things like that. So some of that is, like, out of my control. So, like...
That's what you were talking about, how there's parts of it that aren't as fun as... somebody may think.
Well, I mean, in terms of like that feeling of like, oh, it'll all work out, I do try to actively keep that. Like I have found it very helpful for me personally to just be like, no matter what, it's still good. Like if they don't hire me or if they don't want to go with this, it's not the end of the world. I've come to be better at that, like to be better at possible rejection. And like, I mean, it has happened a few times, and it wasn't like the end of the world. Like
where you've gone through, you've created a design, you've presented it, and then they're like, actually, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
With Sarah's photography, she's talked a little bit about how whatever it is she's nitpicking at, let's say it's an event she photographed, it's pretty unlikely that the person who, your client, is going to even see what it is she's poking with.
Unlikely.
And they're just going to be thrilled. And it's really it's almost like having a fight with yourself over something that, in a sense, doesn't even exist in the end. Right? Yeah.
It's like 99.9% of the time, people are happy and they're just excited to see a taken photograph of themselves or
but
their family
you
or their
want to be
baby.
happy, though.
I am much tougher on the work. It's sometimes it's that 0.1% that's just like, it doesn't matter how I would have taken the photo, what I would have composed, what I would have done with the light. They probably wouldn't have been happy with it for whatever reason.
Right.
And that's because art is subjective and it's hard to
That's
look
true.
at it objectively. Even on my own, I am super hard on myself when I'm in Photoshop and then trying to recover from photoshopping too much, trying to leave things as natural as you can. Like, when is it ever done? Right?
Yeah.
When is your piece done?
Oh man, yeah.
What's the timeline of a mural? Is it done over the span of 3 days? I don't know.
No.
Some of them are enormous.
Well, Goudies Lane was like a live painting thing, so it had to be done like.
Was it? I didn't even know this part. Tell me everything.
Yeah. Oh,
Is it an event while you were like out there?
It was me and like all the other artists like next to me. Like we were all painting.
Oh.
And,
There's some great stuff in there.
and they had music and food and people like watching me.
Did everyone wear a mask? I don't understand.
They just stood back.
Okay.
But yeah, so I had like 4 hours to do it, which was difficult. I
can't believe you did that in 4 hours. I love it.
I didn't.
So much.
At the end, my husband was helping me. He was taping because I had already had it like mapped out. So he was like taping it, and then it was like dark. So my in-laws were there, and they were holding their phone for light. So I'm like, I need to finish this. I think it took me more like 6 hours, not 4, or maybe I don't know, but yeah, mostly
no pressure.
They're usually not that fast though, because I was small and it was pre-planned and everything. But I'd say
I was thinking you must paint, and then if you have to walk away from it, you come back, and hopefully you're just really happy with what you see, and then you get back into it.
Like after it's done?
No, like maybe if you go get lunch, or if you walk away for a day and then you come back and you continue. Yeah. I hope you have that experience where you see it for the fresh eyes after a night and go, this is looking great. And you jump back into it. Like
that definitely happens. And sometimes I know like, well, this is not going to look good yet, but once like it's like I can picture it
like
in
an
my head.
Underpainting kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah. Or like I do a section and like there's all this overspray, but I know it'll get covered up. But yeah, usually it'll take a week. Most of my like the sort of small to medium ones will take like about a week, and then the larger ones will be like 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Like the 800 Franklin one would be a 2 week.
Oh well, that one was while I was working full time in Toronto, so I did that only on weekends. So and I had someone helping me full time. Like I was paying. Actually, it was my sister-in-law, but I was still paying her to help me do that. And actually, a couple of times my husband also came to help because we only had the weekends and it was getting super cold. But I think the total number of days of work was probably like 14 days or something. Is
mural painting with spray paint, is it like acrylics and you're working light to dark pretty much? Like you...
Yeah, are you layering sort of?
It really depends on the design, like on the composition, because sometimes it makes more sense to do it by color or sometimes by section, because of accessibility. So say if it's like a pain to like reach, like say I have to set up the scaffolding or like I have to move the lift or whatever to get to an area, then I'm just going to do that whole area and then move. Or if it's easy to just move back and forth, or if I'm waiting for paint to dry before I can tape it, I'll just go to another area. So, and it also depends on the design, because like I'll try to do the light colors first because it's for coverage reasons, but the other factors play in too, like just in terms of accessibility or like, I don't know how to describe, because it depends.
Oh, I think
or like if there's a background or not. Yeah, because if it's like all like say triangles, then it's just I just do by triangle.
With spray paint, my wife recently spray painted a pair of rubber like rain boots for a costume. Yeah, and I was surprised to see 2 entire cans were needed just to get them as like yellow as it could be, and over the black. Oh yeah. So I'm not even sure. I don't think
yellow covers
I feel
really
like
bad.
I can't even comprehend how many cans of spray paint are needed.
She should have primed them.
Well, I find that even without primer, like with yellow in particular, sometimes like if there's some crap on it or overspray from what I was doing, I have to put white down because the yellow just covers so badly. Yeah. Like
maybe something in the chemical makeup of how that.
It's just semi-transparent or something. I don't know. At least with the sprays, but like I used to I'm still pretty terrible at guessing how much I'll need, but like I recently did one for, you know, that big triangular one. It was on my Instagram for Deutschman law. So that one, I used over 200 cans of spray paint. I actually kept track. I mean, they weren't all used fully. Some are like half, but yeah, that's a lot of spray paint.
And that one's beautiful. That's the one that wraps around the corner a little bit. Yeah, that's really cool. But actually,
does spray paint work like acrylics in the sense that sometimes acrylic painters will do like a cadmium yellow underpainting, and then when you put other colors on top, like an orange or a red, it's almost like it's illuminated from beneath, and it gives it an extra warm. The spray paint, I think of spray paint as pretty like a cold kind of medium, like in terms of it doesn't.
Like it's more opaque, or
and doesn't care what's underneath it. Like
well, I think it depends on the colors. Some are a little more like some do, like what you're saying, like they're a little more transparent.
But can you get a warm black? Can you get a nice warm black with a bit of red in there? Is that possible?
No, see, like if I put black on something, it'll just won't.
It's almost like crayons. I don't know if that's a good example, but it's kind of like a crayon. It's kind of like that's the color.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. But I find that like,
or a Sharpie,
it is influenced by, especially when I'm trying to like blend colors together. I go farther away and I'm like fading it. So then it still shows what's behind. But yeah, like if I were to take a dark color and put it on top of another one, it will cover it fully without being influenced by that. It's only like say the yellows and the like lighter colors, sometimes pinks, that you have to do it a few more times before the color behind it doesn't show. Yeah.
So that only control that you have then for blending is that distance, so that the spray is actually hitting less, kind of dots per inch, I guess, or splatters per inch.
That's why I ended up going through so many cans. So much of it is just dust, like that settles after it's in the air.
That's a big expense. I was just doing the math in my head of what 200 cans must cost.
You buy this stuff in like wholesale?
Yeah, I do buy it in bulk. I buy it online. Actually, it's sad that I can't nowhere locally.
I mean, your supplier.
Is there like a Winsor Newton of spray paint? Like, is there different? Like, you spend if the more you spend, the better quality spray paint you'll get.
Well, they're all roughly like the ones that sort of graffiti artists, or like I guess professional artists of any kind use. They're all roughly the same price. I mean, there's some that are a little more, but I wouldn't say that they're necessarily like the best. It's just they're more expensive because they're like lower pressure, so they're suited for certain kinds of, like the lower pressure, it's easier, you have more control, and then you could be slower almost, like,
so it's letting out less paint per, I don't know, pressure.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Like I know that there's one called Montana Gold or something that one's more expensive, and it's because of that, I think. I don't really use that one, but I mean, the two brands that I'm aware of that are known for being the best or like really good are like Molotov and Montana. And then there's also, there's Montana and MTN. So yeah, those three are like the best ones that I know of. But there's lots of other ones that are good too. It's just that those are the ones that I see a lot of big artists using, like international artists. I'm like, okay, if they're using that, it's probably
give it a try.
Yeah. And then I can order it from Montreal. There's this graffiti artist shop that I can order in bulk, and then the more you order, the cheaper the can. So it's actually, even though those are the best quality ones, it's cheaper to get those than to get like a Krylon or the ones you get in Home Depot, which actually are much harder to use, like the nozzles they come with, and I could never do what I'm doing with those types of spray. And
then maybe that's what we're talking about too, when small home improvement projects or costume making, and we buy the cheaper, more readily available
but those
brands,
are more
they're
expensive.
So hard to use.
Like they probably usually like $10 a can.
Are they?
Yeah,
that's
like,
a lot.
Like when I buy it in bulk, it's like 7, depending, it varies from 7.7 to 7.2 or something per can. Yeah.
I have an environmental question that we can cut out if you don't want to include it. Okay. So my question is about dust, the settling of dust, and the cans. Are these, what's the environmental impact? What are you, are these going up to the paint depot up at the Waterloo landfill where they're processing it there? Like, what are you doing and how do you deal with all that?
It only needs to go to has waste if there's some paint left. So otherwise it's just recycling.
It's like just straight up recycling.
Recycling empty cans, and all the plastic gets recycled too from the caps.
So if that spray can is totally spent, that can just be recycled through your blue box program.
Yes, yeah.
That's amazing. I actually wouldn't have assumed that.
Oh,
yeah.
I just don't like leaving them outside because sometimes, like, you know, people that like to tag things that like go looking through and see if they can like
left to write
salvage
an F word on a mailbox.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. I usually only put it out like when they're picking up recycling.
I'm really impressed that Staples now has a thing right in every front door that you can just put the spray can
you
into.
can?
Yeah, along with batteries.
Can you take your giant boxes of
I didn't know that. But yeah, sometimes I do need to go to has waste, but they do limit how much you can take at has waste at a time, because it's like very little, or like I don't want the color anymore, or it's like, or the other types of paint, like, you know, I also use regular like latex, like the wall paint, because I don't always spray, especially for indoor stuff. So, and then sometimes it dries out or whatever, and so there's just a bit of waste in that sense. But if it's dried up, then it's like a solid thing, and I just throw it in the garbage. But if there's some in there, then it technically has to go, or even if it's like lining the thing, the can, it has to go to has waste.
When you're being commissioned for a new work at this point, I'm not sure I understand the conversation that happens where, let's say you present yourself, say I'd like to do a non-representational abstract painting. What is there to discuss at that point? Like, can I guess your client can say, it's very important that this is full of maybe golds and Naples yellows and stuff or whatnot, or how do you even discuss a complete abstract piece where they're not looking for something representational in the piece?
Usually they don't really discuss it. Like they kind of just like, we want you to create something cool. And I like that. I like that it's very open-ended.
I think you probably heard me chuckle there for a second. And I think it's because I have a pretty strong feeling that people are approaching Stephanie knowing what she's got to offer.
Yeah.
I think at this point it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like your work is so well represented at this point that people are calling you up for a Boutari. Like they're not like,
no.
Do your thing.
Could you create something that looks good? Like they know that just do your thing, and they're pretty much trusting you and putting that faith in you. That's what I'm assuming.
Well, like I'd say like 90% or whatever of the time it is like that, but sometimes they don't give me any direction, and then they discover what they don't want. After I've, so then they're like, oh, that's really bright, or they just, you know, they had a particular style in mind from something I did earlier. Like I submitted this design, I was really excited about. They hadn't discussed anything at all about what they wanted. They just like create something. And I was so excited about it. But then they're like, oh, we were picturing something more like what you did at Thalmic Labs or like Abe Erb. I'm like, oh, because like I've not been doing that kind of style more recently, I guess. So sometimes that'll happen. So it's better for that kind of to be said earlier, but yeah. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did answer it, actually. I was wondering if there was more.
Yeah, for me, it wouldn't make sense to do some kind of short mock-up like kind of thing, because it's not what's gonna happen when you get up on that kind of scale, right? Like you.
Yeah, it's not like maybe like you're. I guess, are you kind of getting it? Is Stephanie sitting there with her colored pencils and her book and
like in front of
sketching
them?
stuff? And people are like, not like that, more like this. Like it's not that type of commission.
No.
Well, usually what happened. Well, it took me a long time to get to this point, but now I ask for like a retainer, so I don't even do any sketches or anything until.
It's very smart business.
Because it ends up taking up a lot of time. Because usually I'll have like a blocks of time where I'm like doing just design work, and then like a month will go by and I'm like working on all these designs, and like if they all might not happen, I need to at least be compensated for that time.
100%. And people it's famous that people devalue art and aren't paying for that part of the process, and it is part of the process. So it's very smart business for you to do that.
So discouraging.
It can be. Yeah.
So to better answer your question, so during that time, like, okay, so they've paid me, so then I give them drafts, and like, so then sometimes there is a bit of weird, it's tricky to describe, because they're like, oh, we like this, but could you like tweak, say, this color, or make it less less harsh or make it more organic, or sometimes they don't say those things, but I like explain that I will do that, or this would suit that, or whatever. So it is kind of awkward sometimes to describe it in words, but it is a lot of back and forth of me giving them revisions sometimes. Sometimes they like it right away, which is great, but it's like 50-50. Like sometimes they want me to change it like 100 times.
There's a lot of opinions about art, right?
Yeah. And sometimes it's not because they don't like it, it's because there's other factors like corporate, things, or just too many people to please. I find that when there are too many people making a decision on like the mural, that usually it takes longer to arrive at something. Whereas if it's only one person deciding, it's so much easier.
What kind of changes have you seen when you think about your body of work? Just if you look at your murals, can you see your for example, your color palette changing, or something shifting and changing over the process, the cause and effect of mural after mural? Like
I feel like probably, I don't know that I'm consciously aware of what it is exactly, but I do feel like I feel like I don't have exactly a style, like a specific style, or like, oh, that's Stephanie Boutari or whatever. And I'm not trying to force it either. But I do feel like with time, I've been more and more, not consistent, but there's certain things I'm like, themes that I'm gravitating towards, but I'm not necessarily stuck on them either. I just feel like overall, my work is improving. I don't really know in what way. I just feel better about it, I guess.
It's going to. You're putting in the time and the practice. It's going to improve.
I think
and you're going to become
that must be a great place to be.
Yeah.
Actually.
Creatively.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thanks.
I would love to paint your building.
I've been so fascinated by your path. This is so interesting. I've interviewed hundreds of artists, and I can't think of anybody whose story quite goes like this. That you spent all those years in architecture school to do a bit of a switch up, but I totally see the relationship between architecture and art.
Oh, yeah.
I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah, like some people see architecture more as engineering, but then there's definitely like the whole other end of the spectrum where it's like nothing to do with engineering. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. I think it's incredibly brave that you did ditch architecture and you went in this direction. But again, not to diss that past that you had that brought you here.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah.
Because you're doing something so amazing for our community and we're so much richer for it.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Where can everybody find you?
Sorry.
You're like, I'm in the kitchen.
Like your home address.
So just knock on the side door 3 times. No.
Well, I guess my Instagram is the most updated sort of social media platform I use, and it's at Steph Boutari, STEPHBOUTARI. I'm also on Facebook, but I don't go on it as often. But it's just my name, Stephanie Boutari. I have like an artist page there.
And your website is stephanieboutari.com.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.